Hello everyone, VanguardOfValor here, and welcome back to another episode. But today's episode is a little bit different than most episodes. Today I have a couple quick things I want to say before we really get started, and the first one is thank you guys. You guys are fantastic. That's right, this is our very first subscriber special. I've been meaning to do one of these for ages. Since we hit 100 subscribers, since we hit 500 subscribers, since we hit 1,000 subscribers, since we've hit 2,500 subscribers. I keep meaning to do it and it just keeps not happening because I've been busy and various things have been coming up. But it's happening at last. But this time we're not going to associate it with a number. I'm just calling it the Awesome Subscriber Special because you guys have really been great recently. The channel's been growing a lot because you guys have been enjoying the content, which is amazing. You've been great, leaving all kinds of great feedback, which has been a lot of fun for me, and generally you've been being really great. I've been sick for the last little while, and I'm still sick now, which is why there haven't been any videos recently, and you haven't really been giving me any trouble about it, which has been very nice of you. Definitely appreciate it. But yeah, so all that kind of stuff has been fantastic, and I really appreciate it, so I figured I'd do something back for you guys. So, what are we doing, you ask? Today, we're going to be designing our own mod. Now, I've already got the mod made, so we're kind of going to be recreating it here because I wanted to be able to balance it and get everything working before I tried to make it on camera, because making a mod is a very difficult process. A lot of things went wrong when I was designing it, and I learned a lot of interesting things about how the mods are actually made. So we're going to be doing it using a mod making tool called Superliminal. We're going to be using the HTML coding as well in the actual text files needed to make the game work exactly like we want, and a variety of things like that. But here's the interesting thing. We can look at our ship already. We're not going to jump into the game with it. We can look at it here in the hangar because it is completed. This is what we're going to be making. We're going to be making an R-Wing here. Yes, indeed. So it has a bunch of very interesting things. It has a bunch of custom weapons. These laser cannons are basically basic lasers with custom sounds. The smart bomb is a very special item, which we'll get into later. We're going to give it a custom augment, custom room layout, custom pictures, custom cloaks, custom gibs. We're making the whole thing, the whole kit and caboodle. So if we're going to get into this, I think we better get into it. So we're going to cut out of here and we'll jump back into the Superliminal ship editor, and then we will see what we see. Okay, so I will see you in a second once we're back in that program. Alright, so here we are now in one of the various ship editors for FTL. This one is of course called Superliminal. It was by Cartoflane on the FTL forums, and he's a pretty cool dude making a thing like this for us. Now, this in particular here is the one that I've used for making the ship, although there are various others as well. I like this one as a nice visual display, so you can actually see things as you're putting it all together, and it works pretty nicely, although it does have a couple interesting bugs with it. For example, if you click on a button like this that's going to add a picture, do not hit cancel or it will just crash the program outright. So, with that in mind, let's get towards building this ship. We got a huge big space here, some red and green lines, a blue square, some buttons. All those are good things, but they don't actually help us get started yet. What we need is a hull to work on. So we're going to click on the hull button. It's going to take us to our pictures folder here. We have one for the R-Wing. We're going to hop into here and grab from our image folder, because I have all of the images we're going to need here pre-prepared. I'm going to stick in the R-Wing base image here. Now, if you are going to be making a ship, you're probably going to want to spend a whole bunch of time in Photoshop cleaning up your pictures, getting them from various places, and actually preparing them all. It took a long time for me to work on some of my weapon art and some of my cloak images and those kinds of things because I'm not a very good artist, but I put together something that I think is good enough, so we're going to be using that here. Now, this is of course an R-Wing from Star Fox. It's not entirely sure exactly which one this particular model is based on, but I thought it was pretty cool looking, so we decided to go with it. So that's what we've got here. We have our R-Wing base model. But you can't do anything with this. It's just sitting on our grid, doesn't have anything associated with it. We have to actually do something with it, give it rooms, do something with it to actually make it useful. So to start off, we're going to place it on the grid, because these grids are the squares our rooms can be on. So we want to make sure it's centered along the center of the actual ship so that we can make our column of rooms over here. With that set up, we're going to go over to our room tool, which is the second tool here, and with that we can drag and drop in some rooms. So we'll place one room here, and one room there. We want to be careful when we're placing our rooms, because if they're not a 1x2, 2x1, or a 2x2 room, it doesn't really work with the oxygen images. You can make 1x1 rooms, you can make any size of room really with this editor, but if it isn't one of the ones that's natively in the game, it definitely makes some strange things happen, which is why we're going with the layout we are. So we'll go for 3 rooms here, we'll go for 1 into the G diffusers here, and we'll go 2 rooms in each G diffuser. We could try and go into the wings as well, but it'd be a very zigzaggy ship, and that'd be kind of strange. The G diffusers aren't a really good place to have rooms in, but it kind of makes a bit more sense in the shape that it actually looks kind of like part of the ship. So that's good, we have rooms now. They don't do anything, but we have rooms. So we're going to go into the door editing tool now. We're going to stick some doors into them so they're actually connected to each other. Put them in these various places. We want to make sure every room at least has some access points. And there we go. So all of our rooms can now be accessed. They still don't do anything, but you can get into them, so that's good. But there's still more that needs to be done. Now we need to add some airlocks. We can do this again with the door tool, and then we can leave the door tool alone. We're going to add some airlocks on these doors here and 2 on the front of the ship, because that should give a decent amount of air access to the various rooms. This is going to be a ship where potentially access to the deoxygenated areas could be a problem because there's not a lot of spare space on board this ship. But that is something you're just going to have to deal with when the problem arises. So apart from that, that's pretty good. You can also connect rooms to other rooms that aren't actually directly connected using this tool, but we don't need that for this ship. But that is how things were done, can be done, like with DryEagle's escort duty mod. I don't believe DryEagle uses ship editors. I think he just works with the HTML, but it can be done that way. So that's pretty cool and all, but we really need to give these rooms something to do. So we're going to go back to our room editing tool, and I believe we use the selector tool rather to do this. We're going to double click on a room, and that'll right click on a room. That's the one. It's so easy to get everything confused because there's so many slight variations on what these things actually do. Right click on a room, and we can decide what it actually is. We can give it a system, a subsystem, or a special system, which is the drones, teleporter, cloaking, and artillery. This one is going to be our piloting, because it is basically in the pilot cockpit of the ship. As we move forward, we're going to associate it with some other different systems. Our next one up is going to be our shields. The end is going to be our weapons. There it is. We're going to put our engines down here on the lower side of the ship during the connector to the, the G diffuser. There we go, engines in. We're going to put a cloaking on this ship as well, because the cloaking is a big part of this mod. We're also going to put in I'll put an oxygen over here. We'll put a med bay in this top one. We want to make sure we cover all the major systems so we can do everything we need to do. And then as far as subsystems go, we're going to put our sensors on the top and our doors on the bottom. So this ship is not going to have access to an artillery beam because it does have a cloak, and it's not going to have access to drone control either. Now this room is red. The reason that is because it's not marked as being available at the start. If we check this button here after double clicking on it, it will make the teleporter available as soon as you start a game. But we don't want that to be the case. We want the people to have to unlock it because otherwise the ship will be fairly powerful. So this makes it a little bit more difficult, not having that immediate power boost from having a cloak. Not to mention, we also want to make sure that some systems have enough power to actually be used at the beginning. So we're going to set our engine to have a starting level of 2 instead of 1 power bar, and our shields to have a starting level of 2 instead of 1 power bar, and finally our weapons to have a starting level of 2 instead of 1. So that means they have a little bit more power in them to actually begin with, meaning you can actually use a little bit more of your stuff. You're a little bit less vulnerable. Starting with these shields on only 1 power bar is just begging to get absolutely ravaged. Now, with that said, we now have a fairly functional ship. It doesn't look like much, but it has working rooms, so if we put it together, it would actually do things. It's still not finished, though, not by a long shot. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add the images to these rooms so that it actually looks like they have something in them. I've designed custom interior images for them, so we're going to be using those. We're setting the interior image, and this will bring us to the folder I've made with all of our interior pictures for it. In order to use this, we are going to be picking our pilot station there, and that's going to go right in that slot. We need to set the interior image for each room, so this is for our shields, that'll do from there. For our weapons, we'll set our interior image for that one as well. Our weapons image is there, that'll do. And as we set all of these in, our ship will start to look a little bit more like an actual ship. Our sensors are where they are. There they are. Oxygen, or rather med bay, goes in here as well. We have to fix all of these rooms so we can actually use them all. Now the med bay is interesting as well. We'll get into that in a second when we start working on stations for these rooms. Because as it stands, while the rooms themselves are functional, people can't actually use them. They're just images of rooms. They have no stations. So like people couldn't work in the piloting, people couldn't work in the shields. They'd just be standing nearby and looking at them. There's our engines image, and finally our doors. There we go. So there we go. Now our ship actually has some rooms to it. So that's pretty cool. You can see the consoles where they're supposed to be and all that kind of thing. But we want to make sure people can actually use them. So what we're going to do next is we're going to go to this tool, the System Station tool. Using this tool, we can actually come in here and place the rooms, or rather the stations, and where they are in the ship. So by clicking on the room, we see that little purple panel appears. That would mean that they would face this way, the top of the room here, to actually work on that station. That's not what we want, of course, so we're going to hit Shift and click again to rotate it around to the position we want. For the shields, that's the correct position. For the weapons, we need to rotate it again. And for the engines, we need to rotate it again. And that means that those stations can all be manned. Now, you might also remember that in a normal med bay, you can't use all the spaces in it. One is generally blocked off by some part of computer console, and that's also done with this tool. If you want to block off a tile, you click in it and make it purple. There's only one purple tile at a time, and that determines which of the tiles can't be used for healing. But we only have 2 spaces in this med bay, so we want to make sure that we can always use it. So I believe it's right-click to remove it? Yes. Possibly shift right-click to remove. No, just right-click. Yes. So yeah, that makes sure that this station will always be available. Oh, we didn't give our cloaking system its interior image yet. That one is there. There we go. So now all of our stations have their pictures. They all have an actual workable station, so that's good. But there's still a bunch of things missing, in case you haven't noticed. First of all, we don't have a shield image, a floor image, a cloak image, or a mini ship image. All of these are vital to actually completing your ship if you want to have those features. And generally shields and floors and cloaks and mini ships are things you want to have. So our shield image is the next on our list. We're going to go back to our ship folder here, and we're going to add our R-Wing shields picture in. This is just one of the shields taken from the normal ships that generally fits the shape of ours. So if we stick it in here, it should probably fit pretty well. Stick it in about there maybe. That looks pretty good to me. Alright, so we have a shield around our ship as well. Next we'll add our floor image. The floor image is very simple. This is just a full picture the same size as my ship except made of transparency. So there's nothing there. That would normally give the little gray edge around your rooms. That would kind of flesh it out a little bit more. But given how thin this ship is, we don't really want to put that edging around it because it will kind of obscure most of the rest of the ship. So we're not going to worry about adding that in, but that's what that's for. If you look at a traditional ship, it has a little rounded edge around it, and that's what you do with the floor image. But you literally have to draw it yourself. So it's a little bit of a bother if you want to add that in. Next up, we're going to add in our cloaking image, and this one is one of the parts I'm particularly proud of with this mod. I spent a lot of time working on getting this cloaking image looking right, and I will show you what it looks like using this button. When we click it, it shows us what we look like when we're cloaked. Now this is of course an R-Wing, so the mod has a whole bunch of references to Star Fox 64 in it. And this is one of my favorite ones. If we activate the cloaking, Peppy pops up and tells us to do a barrel roll by pressing Z or R twice. Also, we have kind of similar look here with the spiraling ship effect here. It doesn't work out perfectly, but I thought it was something cool that I don't think anyone else has done yet, so I thought it would be fun to try and do. So that's that. Now, we have a cloak image as well, so that's good. That's one of my favorite parts of this mod, actually, that little cloak image. Next up, we're going to add our mini ship image, which is very simple. The mini ship image is really just the same ship, just smaller looking. So that's nothing too fancy, although I don't know where that actually the image went. Oh, there it is. It's in a different folder because that's where it goes in the game, into this customized UI folder. So we'll grab our mini ship R-Wing, which is literally just the ship image but smaller. That will appear, for example, in the scoreboards, so it will actually have a picture there rather than just looking like the Kestrel or whatever ship we decide to replace it with. So that's that, and we're doing pretty good here. Our ship is looking pretty solid. There are, of course, a couple things still missing, though. For one thing, we have no weapons, so we're going to need to add those in next. With our weapon mounting tool, we can set in weapons into the ship that will tell us what's going to actually happen with them. So this weapon is going to descend to the bottom and is currently facing the bottom. So it's the weapon would normally be like a laser, it would look like it was mounted to this part of the ship. We can rotate that around by clicking in... Nope, wrong button. Delete that one, thank you very much. We can rotate that around, rather, by shift right-clicking, and that will change the direction the piece is facing. If we alt-right-click, it turns the direction which the actual part looks, because the arrow determines the direction that the part will extend. The little V, if it's facing down, means that the part will have its bottom, will look like it is mounted to this part of the ship, or this part of the ship. So that's the idea with that. So we're going to make sure it's associated this way. It's a bit confusing, I know, but we're going to associate one on here and click it right about there. We want to have... Oh, just missed. That's okay. We can fix that in a second. So we want to make sure we have... Oh, no. Come on now, game. Let me do this properly. Delete. There we go. We want to make sure we associate all of our weapon mounts to the appropriate parts of the ship. There. No. So many buttons. There we go. We'll one on each side, and we'll have a third as well, because we want to have about 3 weapon slots for this ship, so that will do it. One will also be about there. We can position them more precisely with the cursor tool. We can actually put them exactly where we want them. We'll put this one about there. That's probably about right. And about there, and another one about there. Now, see, here's the thing about this. This is a very very precise thing. I'm just kind of generally placing them here, but this is a test. If you were to try and get them exactly placed, it involves a lot of trial and error. You place them, you go into the game and see what they look like, you move it by a couple pixels. You go back, you see what it looks like in game, you move it by a couple pixels. You want to make sure they're exactly right. Now if you want to make sure they're exactly online with each other, you can click on one of them and it'll give you their X and Y coordinates here. If you click on the other one, you can see their X and Y coordinates. You want to make sure they're the same, you can tap them over. Like this one is 1 pixel over from where the other one is placed, which is actually very close. And you can make sure that they're very close to each other that way. So there's our 3 weapon mounts. So now our ship has the potential to have 3 weapon positions. So that's good, but there's still plenty to be done. Now though, we have a bunch of good things working for us here. We have our ships, we have our rooms, we have all kinds of good things, we have our positions on those consoles, we have our doors in, we have our weapons mounted, we have our various images in place, but there's a couple more images we need to add in. Now some of these consoles, when you actually have someone working at them, light up. We need to set glow images for that to actually happen. There's 3 different glow images for most systems, only 1 for the cloaking. So I've already got those in as well. If we go back to our image folder, back to our ship folder, and back to our interiors folder, we can see these are all the glow images, these blue, green, and yellow things, which I'm sure you noticed before. We need to click each of them into each of the slots, and that will allow the computers to light up in the appropriate way. It's not a particularly vital thing, but it is important, because if you don't set those glow images, when the game tries to use them, it will just put a black thing over your room, like a black overlay, and that's not exactly what we want to have happening. So by setting these glow images back in, we'll be able to use them in the way we actually intended, and it won't look too bad. So that'll be good. It's never fun when you have something almost ready to go and then for some reason in the actual game it causes all kinds of problems. And that is literally the story of modding in this game. You get things to the point where you think they're just about good to go and then they really, really aren't. So there's some more of our engines as well set in, and there is the third. There we go. So our glow images are now all in place. So that's good. All of our computer consoles will light up as they're supposed to, and that is fantastic. But there's still more to be done. Still more to be done. We're going to next add some gibs to our ship. These determine how our ship looks when it dies, and we have a couple interesting parts for this as well. So this will give us an overlay showing us where the actual pieces of our weapons are, because those are also animatable gibs for whatever reason. But we're going to have to make sure we line it up with the normal tool. So as we're placing them in here, we're going to have to go back and forth to make sure they're in the right positions. But the first gib that we're going to add is in here. We have 3 hull gibs and a Falco gib, because this is of course based on Star Fox 64, so we have another text bubble shot popping up here with Falco yelling "No!" as you die, which is, I think, pretty funny. So here we go, we're going to add in a couple of our ships here. I believe this one was there-ish. Now here's the thing, if we can line up this first one, it should be really easy to line up the others. If we can make sure that they're in the correct position by flicking back and forth, we'll be able to see. So it's not quite right, but it's fairly close. We can flick back and forth until we get them in exactly the right spot. This one is a couple pixels high now. Oh, no, 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 no. That was not what I wanted it to do at all. But yeah, we want to get close to the right position, and then we'll be able to go from there. It doesn't really matter for this version because I do already have the mod finished, as you've seen. But just so you get the idea here, we want to have it in exactly the right spot. Now it just needs to go back a little bit. That might have been too far back. Yes, it was. Anyway, it's a very fine detail thing to get it in exactly the right spot. And I think that might actually be exactly the right spot because I don't see it moving at all when we switch between the two. Now we can add the next gibs. We're going to add in the top wing. We'll stick that in here like so. So we get in exactly the right place so it fits in perfectly. And there we go. Now we'll add in the lower wing gib. These are very simple gibs that I put together just so we had some... No, come on now. Game, don't put it in behind the other one. Whichever one is higher on the list is higher on the gibs. So, higher in the layers, rather. So that's good to keep in mind. But, yeah. Frustrating. Alright, come on now. There we go. Is that a little bit too low? I think it is. One up higher would be good. Come on now. There we go. Perfect. Alright, so now we have our gibs in place. So these are, of course, broken bits of our wing. And we have to add the final one, which is Falco. We'll stick him down here, and we'll put him on the highest level so that nothing can run over him. Now we can test it and see what happens if the ship were to explode. We hit the animate button, and we'll see that everything kind of shatters apart. But we can make it exactly how we want it to happen. We see Falco spinning a lot here, which is something we want to try and avoid, and these parts are moving in a kind of sporadic way. So what we're going to do is, we're going to go into the actual pieces, and we can see exactly what they have. This is Falco's piece here. We want to make sure that Falco doesn't move at all. So we set the angular rotation to 0 on each of them. The direction to effectively 0. We can't quite make it be nothing, for whatever reason, but we'll set it as close to as we can. So it does basically has no movement values. It's not supposed to move at all. It's going to move a little bit anyway, because it does for whatever reason, but it'll be as immobile as possible. Now we have to move on to the other parts of the ship, and we want to make sure they're also immobile. So this one, we want to actually have a fairly decent amount of rotation to it, movement to it. We want to make sure it only moves forward. So we're going to change these rotation values here, the direction, minimum and maximum, so that it only has the potential to move in this sort of forward arc. That's what that means. That green circle there determines which of the 360 degrees it can move in. Now we're going to change the velocity. We don't want it to go backwards, so we're going to set the minimum velocity to 0 and the maximum velocity up to 1. So it could go pretty fast, but only in this direction. It can't go backwards. The angular rotation, how much it can spin, that's okay. We'll set that one up to maybe 5 in each direction. We'll see how that looks. There we go. Now we're going to come into our wings and modify them as well. We're going to come in here and make sure that they can only go away from the body of the ship so they don't accidentally cross over it. So we're going to reduce that angle to about there, and this angle is going to go about that way, so it goes somewhere in this direction. We're going to make sure that it does not go backwards either, so its minimum velocity is there. I believe this is correct. I may have to do this one backwards, actually. No, I think that's right. We set that one maximum velocity to 5. Angular velocity is fine like that. And that will be good. We'll come down to the other wing and we'll set it in the same way, with the minimum velocity to be 0, so it can't go backwards, maximum velocity 5. We'll leave those things like that, and we change the angle for this one to go downwards. So now it'll go a little bit better. It's not perfect, of course, but if we animate it now, we'll see that the ship doesn't actually go in the same way as it used to. Now this part goes forward in some direction. This one just rolled really poorly on its rotation value, so it's just sort of drifting away. But normally they'll be able to spin away quite nicely. That one didn't move at all, which is really weird. And Falco stays immobile. In this editor he does, in the actual game he doesn't. So it makes the gibs look a little bit more interesting, and you can really customize how your ship comes apart. So that's that done. Okay, our ship is looking pretty good now. It's got gibs for when it dies, it's got stations, it's got weapons, it's got doors, it's got rooms, it's got all kinds of fancy things organized in it. There's no cloaking to begin with, but we're still not quite done. Now we have to come into the properties menu. This is a little bit of a general thing here, but a lot of the things about your ship actually are determined in this area. So we're going to name it. We're going to name it the R-Wing 1. We're going to also name the layout the R-Wing 1, so that the file that is created has that as a name for it. We'll have to rename it anyway, but that's fine. And we'll give it the class, why not R-Wing 1? Yes. And we have to give it a description, so that it'll show up in the ship selection area. We're going to give it a description that kind of goes along the theme of Star Fox fitting into the FTL universe. We're going to say, these highly advanced fighters single-handedly saved the Lilat system from the ravages of Andros. Anyway, we'll have an actual, specifically well-written one, or at least better-written one. Oh my goodness, words. Better-written one on the actual ship, but that's the idea. You can fit in your description here, and that... Save the Lilat? Come on. Lilat system. There we go, from the Ravages of Andros. That will allow us to actually customize what we say in there, and that will appear generally in those places. Now we have to do some other things. We have to determine how many missiles, drone parts, and hull health you start off with. Since 9 bombs is the maximum bombs a fighter can have in Star Fox, we're going to give the R-Wing 9 missiles to start off with. 0 drone parts, since it has no drone system, those don't matter. And we're going to give them 30 hull health, which is the standard for most ships. So that's that. That's good, and that will keep us going. Now this determines where it starts showing up and how late it ends showing up if it is marked as an enemy ship, but that's not relevant for our player ship. Now if we come here into the systems, we can see what we actually have equipped, and we can see what we actually have available. So we have 9 power to run all the systems, but that's only including our cloak. For our available systems, that's 8. We're going to give 7 reactor power to start out with, which is pretty much standard because it means you'll have to take power out of your medbay to power something else. That's generally how people do it. So that'll be good. Next on our crew area, we're going to give the people 2 crew. You can actually change the maximum from anywhere up to 8 and 0. Oh, I mean, yes, right. Crew maximum determines if it's a robot ship, I believe. So that's not relevant for us. But we are going to give 1 human and 1 NG here. You can give anything of the various races. You can give random, but only to enemy ships. Doesn't do anything if it's on a player ship. Just gives you more humans. But it will give you a human and an NG here for our ship. The reason is, I'd love to give just one person here, because these are our wings, which are, at their nature, a one-person craft, but having only one person on your ship, while it is possible, as I showed on my Soul Survivor video, isn't a pain in the butt, especially for a ship like this which doesn't have access to drones, which are a big help when you don't have additional crew. So we're going to give you a human and an NG, so you can actually deal with initial damage, and you're not immediately crippled by a single hit to somewhere in your ship. So that's what we're going to do for that. We can just say that we have Fox and Rob here. So that's the idea. Now, if we come into our augments, we can give them any of the custom augments from the ship. And by custom, I mean the ones that are in the ship. We can give them even a weapon pre-igniter if we wanted. We can give them anything from these various lists. What we're going to be giving them, though, nothing too powerful. We're going to give them an FTL recharge booster because this is Star Fox 64. So, of course, you have to be able to use the boost to get through. So that's what we've got. That'll do just fine. We come here to weapons. This is an interesting thing. We're going to give 3 weapon slots because we have 3 weapon mounts, and we're not putting a 4th in. You're limited to 3 weapons on this ship, and the weapon count is going to be marked as 3. This determines how many weapons your ship actually starts with. So if you don't have a specific number here and you put in, say, 2 and your weapon count says 1, it's not going to work properly. So we want to say 3 there because that's how many we're going to give it. Now from this list here, we can actually pick the kind of weapons we want to give them. We can give them missile weapons, we can give them any of the different missile weapons, what have you, even their boss missiles. But we're not going to do that, because the weapons we've made are specialized. We've actually customized our weapons in a specific way, so we're not going to be using them here. So that's good to keep in mind. Whew. Now we're going to hop over to the next thing. The final thing is the drones menu, which we're not going to do at all, because we have no drone slots wanted, no drone control, no drone parts, no nothings. So that's that. For another ship that actually used drones, we need to use this menu, but since we do not, we don't need it. And that's that. So this ship is just about ready to go, but there's still a couple things that need to be changed. First of all, this determines where your ship is centered. If you hold shift, you can move this area around, and that'll determine where your ship is actually placed in reference to the real game. We're going to want it to be about there, so that's actually fairly well balanced in the menu screen. Perhaps one more over. Pop it over one more, that might do better. And that will actually center it a little bit better in the actual game. We can also do a little bit of fine-tuning in the vertical scale, so if you're not linked to just this amount, if we press the right mouse button on the blue square and drag down, this is an offset bar that will push your ship up or down, depending on how far you put it. We're going to want it to be about there, but it doesn't really matter, like I said, because we do already have one that is perfect. But that is the idea. So you can use that to set the offset, and then you'll be able to see a little bit more about that. Whew! If you move this as a general thing, it moves the entire ship, so it's not a problem if that gets moved. So, that's a lot of good stuff we got going on here now. We have our ship, we have our crew, we have our weapons, we have everything we need, as far as I can tell. We have rooms, doors, weapons. Yes, I think we have everything. Fantastic. Do a quick run through here one more time to make sure we have everything we need, and then we'll be ready to move on to the next step. And the next step is a bit of a doozy. This is the one that's going to involve a whole lot of text. But it does need to get done, so we're going to take a look at it and see what we see. Also, I'm doing a test with this video to see what happens if we change the actual size of the recording in between sections, because there was one about in the game, there's one about this tool, which is bigger than the game, there's one about my desktop, which is again bigger. So it'll be interesting to see how that actually works. If it doesn't turn out great, I may have to record this all again a different way, but we'll see how it goes. So, that's this stage completed. Now what we have to do, we can come in here and save our project, and we can export our ship as well. Exporting the ship is what we're going to do. Saving your project doing this is incredibly important because the system does crash fairly often if you're trying to do images and keep messing them up a little bit. So definitely keep in mind saving is vital every time you change anything important, or even slightly unimportant. Good thing to change. We can hit the export ship button. This is an also important step. The blueprint name that you pick here determines which ship you're going to replace. So we're going to replace the Kestrel, which is marked as player ship hard. There was a player ship easy, as I understand, but it was removed. And this determines where it actually goes. I'm going to stick it on my desktop. And we are going to create an FTL file. But we're not actually going to do this because we're going to change some of the things. We'll do this later. So once we hit export here, bam, we create ourselves our folder. But now we need to go over to the desktop to work on the next step because it's a little bit of a doozy. So I will see you again in a second. Alright, so here we are now on our desktop, and we have this folder we created. player ship hard. If we open it up, it has data and image in it, and that's very nice because those are the folders we need. So we're going to copy paste them out of the folder we just created because we don't need them to be in there, and we're actually going to delete the folder that they came in. Yes, delete that, thank you, go away. Excellent, now we have data and image here, which is going to be very useful to us in the long run since we're going to need them in order to progress. We also need one additional folder, which we're going to get to in a minute. These folders have all of the information we programmed into the game. If we come in here, we can see all the ship pictures we put in here, all our interior images, which you can make sure they've actually been loaded in correctly. If we open up the data folder, it has our rwing.txt, rwing1.xml, and blueprints.xml.append. These things allow us to actually change things in the original game, and these determine the actual qualities of the ship. For example, if we look in here, it determines all this very specific things about where the rooms are placed, what they are, where the doors are placed, and what they are, and all that kind of stuff. Very technical kind of thing, which is why it's quite nice to have access to the superliminal editor in order to do it. Now these .xml files, if you want to take a look at them, make sure you open them with something like Notepad rather than opening them with just double-clicking on them, because then it opens a web page and can't view them. This one determines all our gib data, where our mounts are, and that kind of thing. So this is another very technical thing that we can do with the superliminal editor instead, so we never actually have to deal with those files. Now, we do still have blueprints.xml.append in here. We can just double-click on this one to open it, and it is very important to us. This one allows us to look at the intricacies of our ship description. It determines all the little data, like where the specific rooms are, all that kind of thing, how many people we have, what race they are. We're going to actually make sure that the human is in the first slot and not the NG, because that's how it is intended to be. So this will work. There we go. Now we have the human is the first slot and the NG is in the second. We determine what augments we have, all that kind of thing. Very specific tools here. But this is also very useful because this is what allows us to put in our custom weaponry. So we're going to be doing that here, and it is a very interesting thing indeed. Now, we're not going to be doing it completely from scratch. I do have, like I said, one already made. With the magic of YouTube, we can take this pre-made mod right out of the oven. So we're going to open up our other data folder, which is down here. No, that's the other one. Rwing, yes. We have 3 folders here. We're going to open up data. We're going to open up our blueprints from here as well, and you can see we have some interesting things. We have Laser Rwing, which is one of our custom weapons, and Laser Rwing 2, which is one of our other custom weapons. So we're going to be placing these into this folder, and I'll go over what all the parts of this do so you can understand what our weapons do specifically, and then we will get into a little bit more detail about them. So this here is one of our weapon blueprints. This allows us to have custom weapons for our ship. This one in particular here, Weapon Blueprint Laser Rwing. The name isn't super important, but it does allow you to reference it in other places. It is a laser, which is important. It's not a missile, although it does look like a missile and act kind of like a missile. So that's important. This allows it to ignore, defense drones, which is basically the one thing about them which is kind of fun, because they are smart bombs. This is the bomb from Star Fox 64, so I wanted it to have a very interesting way of working. The short title is how it shows up actually in the game, so it doesn't have its full length, it doesn't take up too much space. You can set a description for it, so, this intelligent explosive locks onto the enemy and blasts their hull, but does no damage to anything inside the ship. Because when I picture the Star Fox bomb, it's a huge explosion, but it only hits the outside. It's a big blast, but I don't imagine it would do too much to the systems in the ship. So that's what it says here. It deals 5 hull damage at the cost of a missile, but it specifically only does hull damage. The way I've done that here is we've come in, we've given it 5 damage as its damage value, but as far as system damage goes, it is -5, and personnel damage is -5. So while it does the damage, it also immediately re-heals the system and heals the personnel damage. So whatever you do, don't use this bomb on a system you've already knocked out, because I believe it will probably heal it afterwards, because you can't do more damage than it has, and if you do more damage than a knocked out system already has, it'll get immediately healed for 5, which is not great. But anywhere else on the ship it should be fine, because it won't actually do any system damage or personnel damage. Oh, no, thank you, go away you. Now, what do we have here? We also have access to our missiles. It uses 1 missile, which is important, because it is a missile weapon. We want to make sure it uses 1. It only fires 1 shot, if something like the Pegasus missiles would fire 2. SP, I don't believe actually has any value to it, neither does BP. They're just values which don't actually have any purpose. There are a couple of those in this game. It doesn't have any chance to start fires or any chance to do breaches, because it's only meant to be doing hull damage. Has a 15-second cooldown, that's what this determines. Costs 2 power to activate. Is only worth 10 if you sell it. This is what it's actually worth in a store, but you can't find it because its rarity is 0. So it's only worth 10 if you try and sell it. and it fires at a speed of 30. It has a projectile speed as it moves across the screen. These ones, though, are where it gets interesting. So we have an image here, a custom image. We use R-Wing Smart Bomb Effects, and we'll get into that in a second. The explosion uses a custom explosion image, Explosion R-Wing Bomb. The launch sound uses a custom sound called Bomb Flight. The hitting ship sound uses a custom Bomb Explode sound, and while the hit shield sounds are the same, well, it can never actually hit the shields, it just has those values so the game is happy with them. And the miss sounds just has the traditional miss. As well, the weapon art uses a custom picture, the R-Wing Smart Bomb Launcher. We'll get into those in a second. As far as our other weapon goes, this is very simple. It's basically just a basic laser. A couple things have been changed, specifically the title and the short version of the title, which is the long version again, because there's no reason to shorten this one. The reason we shorten the one above is so there's room for the missile image below it. The description here talks about the R-Wing's dual lasers have been rewired to fire independently, but you can no longer charge up shots, because I didn't really want to work that mechanic into this FTL mod. And it is basically, apart from that, a basic laser. The one change, or rather the small changes that we've made, involve the sounds. This makes the R-Wing shooting sound, and when it hits a shield, it makes the tick sound that your lasers in Star Fox 64 made when they hit something they couldn't damage. So that was a kind of nice little touch we could add in here. So that's basically the only change here. Apart from that, they're entirely just like basic lasers. The only other thing we have to change... No, go away. The only other thing we have to change here is down at the very bottom, we can see that they have this. Our weapon list has 3 of our weapons in it. If we look at our original mod here, they don't actually have those. So that's not going to work for us. We need to make sure our weapon list actually has those things. So we're going to copy paste those in here, grab this, and copy paste. There we go. This is, of course, a very, very reduced version of making this because there were a lot of problems that popped up. We're going to copy both of our weapons as well because we're going to grab both of those and add them to the blueprints file as well to make sure they're in there because the game has, the superliminal editor has no way of adding these things in originally. We have to add them in custom. We can close our good copy and save the new one. There we go. Done. That will allow us to actually have those weapons on our ship. But we're not done yet. We have 2 more files in here which are very important. Sounds.xml.append and animations.xml.append. We're going to come into animations.xml.append and that's where we have all of our things like our Smart Bomb Launcher picture. We have our Smart Bomb Launcher actual, the animation for the launcher where it fits on the ship, how it charges up. That's very important. The R-Wing bomb, the actual explosion it makes, and the length of the frames. I'll get into these specifically in a second. And the actual projectile for the bomb. So that's pretty important as well. That's what these sets are for. So each one has 2 parts to it. Each of these are relevant to each other. We're going to open, there's nothing to open up here, so we'll just explain it in here, and we're going to copy this file into here. Because you do have to make these custom beforehand. Now the best way to do this is to look at them in the original game. If you open up your data files, you can get into these animations.xml folders yourself and copy paste them and change them as you need them. But basically what this does is its anim sheet determines what the actual image is used from. So this is the Smart Bomb Launcher picture. We say the width of the picture, the height of the picture, how big each frame is in width, and how big each frame is in height, because these have 3 pictures side by side. If we actually open up our image folder as well, I can do that here alongside so you can see what I mean. If we look at the weapons here, this is the Smart Bomb Launcher. There are 3 copies of itself right side by side. So this is the uncharged one, the unpowered one. This is the firing animation, and this is the standard animation. These are based on the Lido missiles from the original game. I just shrunk them down so they're much shorter and gave them those little detailing around the edge because they don't need to be super fancy. The important thing here is the bomb image, which I thought was pretty cool. This is just to differentiate it from normal missile launchers. So that's that. Now this part over here is the actual missile projectile. If we open that up, you can see it there. It has these 4 frames, which have slightly different fire lengths, so the fire looks slightly animated as it flies across the screen. And that is, of course, my poor efforts at modeling the bombs from Star Fox 64 from the side on angle, since they are kind of like hexagon bombs that are red. So that's kind of that. Now that's what that's based on. So this here determines how the actual launcher is placed in the game. This determines how many frames there are, which one is the turned on frame, this one is the where they're shooting frame. These determine where the projectile comes out. This determines where it is placed in relation to your mount on the actual ship. So this takes a lot of fine-tuning to actually get right, and this one determines how it charges up. This is a glow image that gets brighter as it gets more charged. Fairly straightforward. You can compare them to ones that are actually in the game to see how it works. This next one determines the explosion image. It's in its own custom folder as well, in the effects folder. It is, again, just like the one above. We set where the actual, what it's called here, so things can reference it. We say the width of the picture, the height of the picture, the width of each frame, and the height of each frame. In the effects folder, we say what all this is about, the image we're actually using, and we end it there. This lower one, the anim name, is the actual specific explosion R-wing bomb, refers back to this, so it knows what picture to use. You tell it how many frames are in the explosion. This is an offset related thing, you generally don't need those, and how long it spends on each frame. Fairly simple. The one below, again, is for the actual projectile, same as above. This determines the width of the picture, the height of the picture, the width of each frame, the height of each frame, the actual position of the picture in the folders. This one below, no, go away. It really wants me to change the color scheme, I don't want to. This one down here determines the final thing we need to work on, which is how the actual smart bomb explosion works. How many frames are in it, how long to spend on each frame. Okay. What a mess. But this is important, and this is one of the things. This is HTML coding, so if you don't get these things exactly right, they can cause a whole ton of problems for you. It took me ages to realize I had an extra space right there in one of these pictures, and that meant that one of these did not work at all. It was showing us a black square, and it made me go absolutely crazy because of the way it was showing up on screen. I eventually found it and changed it, and then it worked fine. There are so many little things that can go wrong in this that you really have to make sure you pay attention to them. So we're going to copy that folder in there. We're not going to save our changes because it's already good. We're going to go back to the data folder, copy animations.xml into here, and the final one is sounds.xml. This is very simple. This just refers to the sound files we've used. We have to name them like we did. Bomb flight, we have R-wing pew, we have bomb explode, no damage hit. This is where you have to have those names. These files can be named whatever you want as long as they are the appropriate thing and that they're in where you want them. These are .wavs, so that's a good sound file to use, and you can set the volume of them so that determined how loud they are. Whew, lots of things to talk about here, lots of things to change, lots of things to make sure we're working properly, but we're looking pretty good here. So, with that said, we're going to go back again. We'll put the sounds.xml file in there. Okay, that's the data file, all done. But we're not done yet. Now we have to go into the image folder. There are a couple things missing from here as well. If we look at our image folder, we have 4 folders. Here we only have 2. This one has our mini ship image in it, and the ship image has all those files. But we're still missing the effects folder, which has our R-wing explosion. So it kind of looks kind of like that. I'm not the best artist, so it doesn't look super high quality, but I thought it looked pretty cool and was kind of reminiscent of the original bombs in Star Fox, which is kind of what I was going for, that expanding, spiky explosion in that light explosion. So that's the kind of idea. We're going to copy that folder over so we have that as well that this game can refer to. And our weapons folder, which has our custom weapon launcher and our custom projectile. So we copy that and paste it into the game. Whew! Good. We're still not done though. Now we need to give one more folder. This one is a direct copy-paste because there is no audio folder here and already. In the waves file, we have explosions and weapons. Explosions has our bomb explode sound effect, which sounds like this. Which is of course based off the game. No damage hit. When you hit something with a shield, we go back over to waves and weapons. We have these two as well. R-wing pew is the sound effect we shoot, and the bomb flight sound. All pulled from Star Fox themselves. So that will give us the access to those specific sound files that we've been wanting to use. So we can copy that into here, and oops, went down to the bottom. And that is all we need. We have all 3 folders now. Now what we have to do is make them into an FTL file. So we need some kind of way to zip them together, add to a zip file. I use WinZip because I like the program, but you don't need it. You just need some way of zipping these together, I believe. And we need to make them into a custom file. So we don't need them to specifically be called audio. We want them to be called rwing1 because that'll be the name of our actual mod file when we give it to people. So rwing1, we don't need to change any of these other things. Just zip them all together. And I cannot change that. Oh, hang on. That's the problem. Okay. Did that wrong. Whoops. Let's try that again. WinZip, add to zip file. I did not mean to do it like that. We're going to change this. rwing1, that's better. There we go. Didn't take out that last backslash, did not work properly. Now we can delete these, because they're now contained in the zip file. We won't need them again. Stick them in the recycle bin, and we're done. But not quite. Now we need to rename this to be an FTL file. FTL, yes, we want to rename that. Done. This renaming doesn't actually change anything. It just links it so that Grognak's mod manager can understand what it is. So you need to make sure you have your computer settings set up so you can see file extensions like that, so you can change it from .zip to .ftl, but you can figure out how to do that online pretty easily. Just Google it, and you can do that there. So change that to .ftl, and now it is usable as a mod file. So we need to next open up our faster than light folder here. Go into our mods. This is the one, oops. Hey. This is the one that I already put in there, but we copy this into this place. With that in there, we come down, activate the mod manager, and patch it into the game. It'll take a couple seconds as it goes through the various folders and files we have included, because we are, of course, also modding in the gruesome mod DryEagle made and our custom visual mod. And as it sticks all of those in there, we will eventually be able to play it. Now, Mod Manager has been glitching out for me recently and hasn't allowed me to actually launch FTL from it, but that's fine. It doesn't mean too much if we can't do that. We'll just have to launch the game from Steam, and once that is done, we will be able to actually play with our mod. So, that wasn't too bad, was it? It was almost an hour long, but we have successfully made a mod, which is now working in FTL. We'll see it in a second, and we will be able to play with it. Now, the only reason I'm not putting the one we just made in is because it's not as finely tuned as the one I made already. It's basically exactly the same thing, except the image locations aren't quite as good. So it does involve a lot of fine-tuning, going back and forth, and making sure that it actually works. But we're not going to worry too much about that. If we launch up Steam here, launch up FTL, we can see that our mod is now in place and everything works fine. We can hop into the game for a quick second here and test it out, and you'll be able to see just what it does, which is pretty cool, I have to say. Pretty darn cool. So we have it here. We're going to launch a new game. There's our mod ship. It is looking lovely. For some reason there's no sound. Let's go back here in the options. Oh, it says it's on. There it is. Don't know why the sound wasn't showing up there. Kind of weird. Anyway, back to new game, and there we have it. So we have our laser cannons, our smart bomb, our FTL recharge booster. We have both of our crew in their various positions. We have all of our stations. No cloaking right now because you have to unlock it. The name is already the R-Wing 1, which is pretty sweet. There is, of course, no Type B because we didn't design one, but you could design one. We have it set to normal. We can get into the game here, and that's it. We're in here. It works. You can play with it. We jump out of a nebula, all of our rooms will show up again, and it's pretty cool. Pretty darn cool. So that's that. We have a working mod. Now I am going to do a run through with this ship later on, but not right now. I have I'm still a bit sick, and I don't really feel like doing an entire gameplay while I'm sick. But we might do it anyway. Anyway, it'll be coming up soon, probably tomorrow if we can. But that's the idea. We have made ourselves a custom mod, and that's pretty sweet. So, this has been Vanguard of Valor, making us a custom ship mod for FTL today. If you have enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like on the video. And again, thank you guys. This has been a lot of fun. I've really been enjoying making videos, and I'm really glad that you guys have been enjoying watching them. So this has been the end of our awesome subscriber special. And I am very happy to be able to say that it worked out just like it has. So, there will be, of course, links in the description to download this ship for yourself if you want to try it out. There will also be a variety of other links to things like the Superliminal Ship Editor and some of the other tools that I used while I was making this ship if you want to try for yourself. But just keep in mind, I am definitely not a ship-making pro. I am not probably going to be able to help out with a whole lot of problems if you have them, because I don't really know how a lot of this stuff works. I trial and errored my way through a whole lot of it. But it's a pretty cool ship in my opinion, possibly because I made it, but hopefully you think so too, and I look forward to seeing what you guys think about this. So, with that said, this has been Vanguard of Valor. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and I'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.